If the person who brings you tea at night is the same person quietly leading you toward your own destruction, how would you ever know? My name is Eleanor. I'm 66 years old now, a grandmother of 4, living in a quiet little town outside Columbus, Ohio. Folks around here know me as the sweet old lady who bakes pies for church events, who knits scarves for the winter drive, who never forgets birthdays. But they don't know the truth. They don't know that 10 years ago, I lived through a betrayal so deep, it nearly swallowed me whole. Back then, I thought I had finally found peace. I met a man named Harold at a financial workshop at the local library. I'd gone to learn how to manage my pension better after my first husband passed. He was the man giving the presentation, confident, warm, charming in a soft, polite way. His gray hair was neatly combed, his voice was gentle. He joked just enough that people relaxed around him. He noticed me right away. After the workshop, he walked me to my car, carried my folders, told me I had a thoughtful face. I hadn't been called thoughtful in years. He started showing up at my porch with small things, fresh apples from the market, a snow shovel so I wouldn't slip on ice, a new teapot because your hands deserve something nicer. I told him he didn't have to do all that. He'd just smile and say, "Ellie, you spent your life taking care of others. Let someone care for you." That line, it disarmed me completely. My children liked him too. That part still hurts. My daughter, Lauren, said, "Mom, he seems so steady." My son, David, teased me about catching feelings at your age. Even the grandkids liked him. He'd bring them candy and tell silly jokes. I thought I was safe with him. I thought I'd found a good man, a gentle companion for my last stretch of life. We married after a year, a small church ceremony, blue dress, white roses, my pastor saying a prayer over us. Harold squeezed my hands and promised to care for me in sickness and in health. Everyone cried. I cried too. Now I look back and I wish I could grab that version of myself by the shoulders and warn her. Our first year together was peaceful. Too peaceful, maybe. Harold took over the bills, the appointments, the home repairs. He insisted I didn't need to stress myself anymore. He'd cook most nights, he'd rub my shoulders when they were sore, he'd bring me warm tea before bed. He made me feel cherished. Then the care became something else. It started with him worrying about my sleep. "Ellie, you twist and turn all night," he'd say. "You look exhausted in the mornings." I didn't remember twisting or turning. I felt fine, but he insisted. He took me to a new doctor. Not my longtime doctor, the one who knew my medical history, but a new one he said was better with seniors. The doctor barely looked at me. Mostly he talked to Harold about my stress, my forgetfulness, my restless sleep. Forgetfulness? I remember thinking, I'm not forgetful. But the doctor nodded along with Harold and prescribed something light to help me sleep. Just a small white pill. That night, Harold brought it to me on a little tray with chamomile tea. "Open up for me, sweetheart," he said. "We've got to keep you rested." I swallowed it without question. That was the beginning. The pills made me sleep heavier, deeper, too deep. I'd wake up feeling like I'd been pulled out of thick mud, foggy, disconnected. But Harold would kiss my cheek and say, "See, you slept so well." And I believed him. Until little cracks began to show. I'd find things moved around the house and not remember moving them. I'd wake up in clothes I didn't go to bed in. I'd lose track of conversations. Harold would tell me I'd said things I had no memory of saying. At first, I thought it was aging. But aging doesn't make you wake up in nightgowns you don't own. Aging doesn't make you forget entire evenings. Aging doesn't make you afraid of your own bedroom. Something was happening to me, something I couldn't name then. But the truth was coming, slowly, creeping in like a cold draft under a locked door. If the person who claims to protect you is the same person quietly controlling the pieces of your life, how long before you realize you've stopped being the one in charge? The morning things truly shifted, I woke up slower than usual. My mind felt thick. My body felt heavy, like someone had draped wet blankets over my limbs. And Harold was sitting on the edge of the bed, watching me with a look that felt caring at first glance, but wrong underneath. "You were up all night again, Ellie," he said softly. I blinked at him. Up? Doing what? He brushed my hair back, walking from room to room, talking. "You didn't seem fully awake." My stomach tightened. "Harold, I don't remember any of that." "That's the medication," he said kindly. "The doctor warned us you might have night wandering." Night wandering? A term I'd never heard him mention before. He kissed my forehead and helped me sit up. "It's okay, sweetheart. I'll keep an eye on you." That sentence sent a shiver across my skin. I couldn't explain why. His tone was gentle, his hand was warm, but something felt off, like I was being managed, not loved. Later that afternoon, I went to put away laundry in his home office. I wasn't snooping. I wasn't looking for trouble. I was folding towels. That's when I noticed it. A drawer in his desk, one that had always been loose, now fitted with a small brass lock. Shiny, new, out of place. My heart dropped. I touched the lock. Cold metal, firm resistance. Why would my husband need to lock something from me? As I leaned closer, Harold suddenly appeared in the doorway. "What are you doing?" His voice was calm, his smile wasn't. "I thought maybe a sock fell in the drawer," I stuttered. He walked over, closed the door with his foot, and put his hand lightly on my shoulder. "There's sensitive financial paperwork in there. Nothing you need to worry about." Nothing you need to worry about. Those words echoed through my head long after he left the room. That night at dinner, he told me about something I supposedly said to him earlier in the week. "You told me you didn't want to drive after dark anymore," he said casually. "Remember?" I swallowed hard. "I said that?" "Yes, sweetheart. You said it made you nervous." But I didn't remember, not even the smallest piece of that conversation, and the doubt settled in deeper. Maybe I was forgetting things. Maybe I was slipping. Or maybe something else was happening. The cracks widened over the next few weeks. I'd wake up in different clothes than the ones I'd worn to bed. Harold would say I changed during the night. I'd find bruises on my arms. He'd say I bumped into things. He always had an answer, always gentle, always logical. But my fear was growing. And then came the night I can never forget. I woke up around 2 a.m., not fully, just enough to sense movement. I opened my eyes a tiny bit, a sliver, just enough to see a shape standing in our bedroom doorway. Not Harold, someone taller, broader, wearing a dark jacket, staring at me in the dim light. My heart tried to leap out of my chest, but my body didn't move, not an inch. I couldn't speak, couldn't lift my hand, couldn't even take a deep breath. It was like my limbs were made of stone. Then Harold appeared behind the man, calm, comfortable, whispering something to him, like this was normal, like this wasn't the first time. My vision blurred, the fog pulled me under again, and I slipped back into unconsciousness. When I woke up the next morning, sunlight filled the kitchen. Bacon sizzled on the stove. Harold hummed like he had nothing to hide. I sat at the table, shaking. "Harold, was someone in the house last night?" He laughed. "Oh, honey, you had another night terror." "No," I said. "I saw." He touched my cheek. "Ellie, the medication is affecting your dreams. Don't worry, I'll take care of you." Take care of you. Those words felt different now. Heavy, sharp, like a promise wrapped around a threat. And for the first time, I wondered if the danger wasn't in my dreams, but in the man making me doubt them. If the person you trust to keep you safe is the same person quietly monitoring every breath you take, how long before you realize the danger isn't coming from outside your home, but from inside your bedroom? About a week after the night I saw that unfamiliar figure standing in my doorway, things escalated. Not suddenly, not violently, but slowly, subtly, like someone tightening a rope around me inch by inch. It started with my phone. One afternoon, I picked it up to call my daughter and saw messages I didn't remember sending. Nothing dramatic, just short replies, quick confirmations, sure, okay, That's fine. But they didn't sound like me. I always add exclamation points, emojis, a little warmth. These replies were cold, brief, wrong. When I asked Harold about it, he chuckled. "Ellie, you must have texted half asleep. You've been so tired lately." Tired. That word again. I tried to brush it off, but the unease settled deep. A few days later, I found a stack of bills already paid, bills Harold normally reminded me about. I hadn't written the checks, I hadn't signed anything, but everything was completed, neatly filed in the drawer. And the signature at the bottom of one check? It looked like mine, but not quite. Too sharp, too flat, too steady. My hands shook as I held it. That same evening, he brought me my nightly tea and pills earlier than usual. "Let's get you resting," he said warmly. "You've been so scattered." Scattered. Another word I hated. I swallowed the pills because that's what I had been trained to do. But this time, the bitterness was harsher, almost metallic. My tongue tingled. "Harold," I said slowly, "that tasted strange." He kissed my forehead. "You're imagining it." He said that so often that I started doubting myself before I doubted him. But deep inside, something in me, some old quiet survival instinct, was waking up. That night, I tried to stay awake. I pinched my palm, I bit my lip, I tried counting backward from 100. But the dizziness came too fast, the fog too heavy. Within minutes, I was slipping into unconsciousness again. Except, I woke up. Just barely. My eyes didn't want to cooperate, but I forced them to open the smallest amount. And I saw Harold standing at my nightstand, his back slightly bent as he leaned over my side of the bed. He thought I was asleep, unconscious, out cold. He opened the drawer of my nightstand, took my purse out, opened it, removed my wallet, my ID, my bank cards. He placed them neatly on the bed. Then he reached into his pocket and pulled out a small camera, one of those tiny flat ones people use for home surveillance. He pointed it toward me, toward my sleeping body. My chest tightened with terror, but I couldn't move. My body was trapped, heavy, useless, like someone had poured concrete into my veins. I watched through half-closed eyes as he adjusted the angle, lifted my arm, turned my face slightly, arranged my hair, all with a strange gentleness that felt worse than aggression. Then, satisfied, he slipped the camera back into his pocket, left the room, and closed the door behind him. It took everything in me not to scream. The next morning, he made pancakes, blueberry, my favorite. He kissed my cheek and said, "You slept like a baby." I stared at my breakfast plate, fighting nausea. "Harold, did you come into the room last night?" He raised an eyebrow. "I always check on you, sweetheart. You asked me to after you started wandering." "I asked?" "Of course," he said calmly. "You don't remember?" He said it so convincingly, like truth, like sanity, like love. And for a moment, a horrible moment, I questioned myself again. Was I losing my mind? Was I really forgetting entire conversations? Or was he lying? That question gnawed at me all day. So when I got a chance, when he went to his workshop in the garage, I went to his office. My hands shook as I approached the locked drawer. Something whispered inside me, "Find out." I looked around, checked the shelves. Behind a stack of old tax folders, I found a small silver key. My heart almost stopped. I picked it up, walked back to the drawer, and slid the key inside. It turned smoothly. The drawer clicked open, and what I saw inside, what I held in my trembling hands, was the first concrete proof that I wasn't losing my mind at all. I was being controlled, I was being watched, and I was in danger. If the person you share your home with keeps a secret drawer locked tight, ask yourself this: what kind of love requires hiding the truth in the dark? When that drawer opened, my breath froze in my chest. Inside was a neat stack of small black notebooks, thin, identical, labeled only with dates. Under them, envelopes, a few SD cards, a burner phone, and a compact silver camera identical to the one I saw Harold using beside my bed. My hands trembled as I picked up the first notebook. I opened it. At the top of the page, in Harold's neat handwriting, were notes about me. Monday, 11:27 p.m. Dose increased slightly. Ellie asleep by 11:41. Movement minimal tonight. Bank login screenshotted. Password unchanged. Remember to adjust her medication story for next doctor visit. My vision blurred. I flipped through the pages. Every entry was about me. My sleep, my reactions, my cooperation, my bank balance, my medications, my moods. He was documenting me like I was a project, like I was an experiment, and worse, like he had a plan. I reached for the next notebook. More notes, more entries, more dates. 7 months worth. 7 months of tracking every pill he gave me. 7 months of monitoring my mental state. 7 months of ensuring I stayed, what was the word he used? Manageable. I opened an envelope next. Photographs slid out. Photographs of me. Asleep, unconscious, in different clothing than what I remembered wearing to bed, posed in ways I never would have allowed. My nightgown slipping off my shoulder, my arm placed carefully above my head, my face angled like he was creating some kind of twisted portrait. I dropped the photos like they were burning my skin. My heart hammered so loud I thought it would burst. He wasn't just watching me, he was staging me, preparing me for something I couldn't yet understand. I grabbed the burner phone and pressed the power button. It lit up with messages already on the screen, conversations with unknown numbers. She'll be out by 11, guaranteed. Yes, I have new images. Payment received, you know the rules. She doesn't know anything, don't worry. I slapped my hand over my mouth to keep from screaming. My knees nearly gave out. This wasn't just controlling. This wasn't just manipulation. This was trafficking. This was exploitation. And I had been living in the same house with the man responsible for it. As I stood there shaking, I heard footsteps approach the front door. The lock turned. Harold. He was home early. Panic shot through me like lightning. I shoved everything back into the drawer with clumsy, shaking hands, slammed it shut, locked it, threw the key back behind the folders, then rushed out of the office just as the door opened. Harold stepped in, brushing snow off his coat. "There you are," he said cheerfully. "I brought us soup from town." His smile was warm. His eyes were watchful. "Are you okay, Ellie?" he asked. I forced my mouth to move. "Just tired." He walked closer. "You look pale." "I'm fine," I said, "just cold." His fingers brushed my cheek. I nearly flinched. "Let's get you warm." I nodded, but inside, a storm was raging. That night, I couldn't swallow the pills. Not anymore. Not after what I'd seen. So when he handed them to me, I hid them under my tongue. He made me open my mouth, and I pretended to swallow. The moment he left the room, I spat them into my palm and hid them under the mattress. My heart pounded so hard it hurt. When he returned later to check on me, I stayed perfectly still, pretending to be unconscious. He leaned over me, his breath brushing my cheek, watching, waiting. Then he left the room again. And that was when the truth finally clicked into place. He wasn't drugging me to help me sleep. He was drugging me so I wouldn't wake up. He wasn't documenting me out of concern. He was documenting me for profit. And the man I had married, the man who tucked me into bed every night, was the one turning my body into a product. I wasn't losing my mind. I wasn't imagining the danger. I was living with it every single night. If the person beside you at night waits for you to stop fighting sleep before revealing who they truly are, then the moment you pretend to be unconscious becomes the most dangerous silence you'll ever hold. That night, my first night pretending to be asleep, felt like a lifetime compressed into hours. My body lay still under the blankets, but my mind was awake in a way it hadn't been in months. Every creak in the house felt like a warning. Every shift of the floorboards sounded like approaching footsteps. My heart beat so loudly, I was convinced Harold would hear it through the walls. I waited, listened. The house was quiet for a long time. Too quiet. Then, the floorboard outside the bedroom door cracked. Slow, careful, deliberate. Harold pushed the door open, letting in a slice of hallway light. His silhouette hovered in the doorway before he stepped inside and closed it gently behind him. He thought I was unconscious, thought his little routine had worked like always. He moved to the nightstand, opened the drawer softly, then leaned over me. I felt his breath on my cheek, heard him whisper, "Good girl." After a moment, he turned and slipped out again. I counted the seconds. 10, 20, 30. Then I heard it. The basement door opening. I had heard that door before. Late at night, muffled, distant, but I'd been too foggy to question it, too drugged to stay awake, too disconnected to understand the significance. But now I was awake, and fear sharpened every sound. I forced myself out of bed slowly, careful not to make noise. My legs felt weak, muscles trembling from the strain of fighting the pill's lingering effects. I held on to the wall as I crept down the hallway. When I reached the top of the stairs, I listened again. Voices. 2, maybe 3. Male voices, low, muffled, speaking in clipped sentences. I stepped closer, just enough to hear. A stranger said, "She's out?" Harold replied, "Out cold. She won't wake up." My breath hitched. Another voice asked, "You sure the dosage is safe?" Harold laughed softly. "Safe enough. She sleeps through everything, never remembers in the morning." My knees nearly buckled. I gripped the railing to keep from collapsing. There was shuffling, metal clinking, someone setting something up downstairs. Then a phrase that made my blood run cold. "Same rate as last week?" Last week? Last week, when I woke up with that bruise on my arm, when I found my clothes on the floor instead of on me, when Harold said I must have bumped into a door. My mind started putting the pieces together. Pieces I didn't want. Pieces too horrifying to face. Harold wasn't just taking pictures. He wasn't just drugging me. He had a business, a system, a routine, and I was the product. I stumbled backward, choking on my own breath, then forced myself to tiptoe back to the bedroom. I climbed under the blankets just as Harold came upstairs again. He peeked in to check on me. I kept my eyes closed. He walked to the bed, brushed my hair away from my face, whispered, "Good, stay asleep." He didn't know that sleep was the last thing on my mind. After he left, I lay awake until dawn, trembling under the blankets. My thoughts raced, but one truth anchored itself in my chest. I needed proof, real proof. Proof I could take to someone who would believe me. Proof that would survive Harold's lies. Proof he couldn't manipulate or erase. I couldn't run without it. I couldn't tell my children without it. I couldn't survive this nightmare without a way out. So the next morning, after Harold left for errands, I drove to the nearest electronics store. I walked down aisles in a fog until I found what I needed. Hidden cameras. Small, wireless, motion activated. I bought 2. Paid in cash. My hands shook the whole time. When I got home, I planted one camera between the books on my nightstand, a perfect angle of the bed, my nightstand, and Harold's nightly routine. The second camera went in the basement, inside the vent, facing the whole room. Just thinking about that basement made my stomach twist, but I did it anyway, because I needed evidence, and once I had it, I would finally know the truth, no matter how horrifying that truth turned out to be. If you ever find yourself afraid to close your eyes in your own home, then understand this: your instincts are trying to save you long before your mind catches up. For 3 nights after installing the hidden cameras, I pretended everything was normal. I cooked dinner, I folded laundry, I laughed at Harold's corny jokes, I let him bring me my sleep medication. I let him think he was still in control. But each night, I didn't swallow the pills. I tucked them under my tongue, held them there until he checked my mouth, then I flushed them as soon as he left the room. My body still reacted to the routine, though, like it had been conditioned. The heaviness, the fog, the strange drowsiness. Maybe some residue lingered in my system from months of drugging, or maybe the fear alone made my limbs feel weak. But I stayed awake, wide awake, and the cameras stayed recording. On the first night, Harold followed his usual pattern, brought the pills, kissed my forehead, checked on me after 10 minutes, whispered something to himself, then left. He didn't go to the basement, not that night. On the second night, he paced around the hallway outside the bedroom. I could hear his footsteps, steady, anxious, like he was waiting for something, like he was nervous. Then he stayed in the living room for hours, pretending to watch TV. I wondered if he suspected something, but on the third night, he resumed the routine. At 2:14 a.m., the basement door opened. I heard Harold's footsteps, then the low rumble of voices. My heart raced, but I stayed still, stayed quiet, stayed awake, and waited for dawn. The next morning, Harold announced he'd be meeting a friend for lunch. He left around 11:30 a.m. The moment his car rolled out of the driveway, I ran. I grabbed my laptop, closed the curtains, locked the doors, then opened the camera app. My hand trembled so hard I could barely type. First, I checked the bedroom footage. There he was, Harold, entering the room, bringing the pills, watching me, opening my phone, going through my messages, deleting things, rewriting things, checking my bank app, taking pictures of me lying there. But that wasn't the worst of it. The worst was seeing him lean over my unconscious body, touching my face, adjusting my clothes, moving my limbs around like I was a mannequin. Every motion was calm, methodical, practiced, like he had done this many times before. My stomach churned. Then I clicked on the basement feed, and that was where my world unraveled. The footage showed Harold leading two men into the basement, men I didn't recognize, men who seemed too comfortable, too familiar with the space, men who looked toward the stairs, toward where I was supposed to be passed out. I watched Harold accept an envelope from one of them, fat, stuffed, cash. I watched Harold open a laptop and show them something, pictures, videos. Based on the angle of the screen, I couldn't see what images he was showing them, but their reactions, their smirks, their comments, their nodding, they were looking at me, at images of me, images taken without my consent, taken while I was unconscious, taken while I couldn't protect myself. My throat tightened until I couldn't breathe. I scrubbed forward in the footage, terrified but unable to stop. At one point, Harold pointed up toward the ceiling, toward our bedroom. One man laughed. Another shook his head like he couldn't believe his luck. Harold said clearly, "She doesn't wake up, not with the dose I give her." My entire body went cold. Every bruise I woke up with, every missing memory, every different set of clothes, every night he insisted, "You were confused," it all snapped into place. This wasn't about care. This wasn't about medication. This wasn't about sleep. This was exploitation. He wasn't planning to hurt me someday. He had been hurting me for months. And not just him, others too. People he invited into my home. People who paid him. I slammed the laptop shut and ran to the bathroom, shaking so hard I thought I might collapse. I fell to my knees and threw up until there was nothing left inside me. When I finally dragged myself up to the mirror, my reflection looked like a stranger. Pale skin, wide eyes, trembling lips. I whispered, "He's selling me." The words tasted like poison, but saying it out loud made one thing crystal clear. I had to get out. Before he realized I knew, before he came back home, before he decided I was no longer useful. If you ever discover that someone you love has turned your life into a marketplace, then understand this. The moment they sense you pulling away is the moment you become their biggest threat. The minute I realized what Harold had been doing to me, what he'd allowed in our home, what he'd sold behind my back, I knew staying another night under his roof was impossible. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. My body trembled so violently, I had to grip the bathroom counter just to stay upright. But fear wasn't my only companion. Rage simmered beneath it, a deep, burning rage I'd never felt in my life. Betrayal cuts differently when it comes from someone who kissed your forehead every night. But rage couldn't save me. Only planning could. Only evidence could. Only escape could. I splashed water on my face, forced myself to breathe, and moved quickly. My hands still shook, but I had urgency now. Clarity. I gathered every piece of footage, downloaded everything from the cameras, backed it up onto 2 USB drives, then uploaded copies to an email account that Harold didn't know existed. I wasn't taking chances. I wasn't leaving proof behind. Next, I packed a small duffel bag. Just clothes, documents, a few necessities. Not too much. Nothing obvious. I didn't want Harold to see the house disturbed. I checked the clock. 12:23 p.m. I had no idea when he'd return. Lunch with a friend could take an hour or 10 minutes if he changed his mind. I had to move. I grabbed my phone and called my daughter, but halfway through dialing, I stopped. If Harold checked my call logs, if he monitored my phone, if he still had access somehow, no, not yet. Not until I was safely away. I needed an ally who lived close, someone I could reach without raising suspicion. So I called an old friend instead, Nina, a woman from church, kind-hearted, trustworthy, and importantly, someone Harold barely knew. When she picked up, I could barely speak. "Nina, I need help." Her voice shifted instantly. "Ellie, what's wrong?" "I can't explain yet, but I need you to come get me now, please." She didn't hesitate. "I'm leaving my house in 2 minutes. Are you safe?" I swallowed hard. Not for long. I ended the call, grabbed my bag, and stuffed the USBs into my coat pocket. My fingers still tingled from the panic, but I forced myself to stay composed. I listened. The house was silent. I stepped outside and locked the front door behind me to make it look normal. I walked to the bottom of the driveway and waited, every passing car making me flinch. When Nina's gray SUV turned the corner, I almost collapsed with relief. She pulled up fast, I climbed in, slammed the door, and whispered, "Drive." She didn't ask questions, not then. She drove straight to her house, a cozy blue ranch-style place with sun catchers in the windows, a home that felt safe. The moment she locked the door behind us, she turned to me. "Ellie, honey, what happened?" I sank on her couch. For a while, I couldn't speak. Tears spilled before words did. And then, everything poured out. The pills, the memory gaps, the locked drawer, the photographs, the voices in the basement, the men, the footage. By the time I finished, Nina was pale, trembling with anger. "Ellie," she said, her voice shaking, "you're calling the police, today, right now." "But what if they don't believe me?" I whispered. "What if Harold—" She grabbed my hands. "You have evidence. You have recordings. You have documentation. And you have me. They will believe you." Before I could respond, my phone buzzed. Harold. A message. "Soup still warm. Where are you?" My stomach twisted. He was home. He'd noticed I was gone. And he was already looking for me. Nina saw the phone, snatched it from my hand, and turned it off. "Ellie, don't panic," she said firmly. "You're not going back there. Not ever." I took a shaky breath. "Call 911, she said, "right now." And with trembling fingers, I did. If you ever sit across from an officer and have to explain that the man you love was the same man who destroyed your safety, just know this. Telling the truth is terrifying, but silence is far more dangerous. When Nina dialed 911 for me, I could barely form words. My voice shook, my hands trembled. But the moment the operator spoke, something inside me clicked into place. I wasn't imagining things. I wasn't confused. I wasn't forgetting. I was reporting a crime. Within minutes, 2 officers arrived at Nina's house, a man and a woman. The female officer knelt in front of me like I was her own mother and said gently, "Take your time, start wherever you can." So I did. I told them everything: the pills, the memory gaps, the photos, the notebook, the men in the basement, the footage. By the time I finished, Nina was pale, trembling with anger. "Ellie," she said, her voice shaking, "you're calling the police today, right now." "But what if they don't believe me?" I whispered. "What if Harold—" She grabbed my hands. "You have evidence. You have recordings. You have documentation. And you have me. They will believe you." Before I could respond, my phone buzzed. Harold. A message. "Soup's still warm. Where are you?" My stomach twisted. He was home. He noticed I was gone. And he was already looking for me. Mina saw the phone, snatched it from my hand, and turned it off. "Ellie, don't panic," she said firmly. "You're not going back there. Not ever." I took a shaky breath. "Call 911, she said. "Right now." And with trembling fingers, I did. If you ever sit across from an officer and have to explain that the man you love was the same man who destroyed your safety, just know this: telling the truth is terrifying, but silence is far more dangerous. When Nina dialed 911 for me, I could barely form words. My voice shook, my hands trembled, but the moment the operator spoke, something inside me clicked into place. I wasn't imagining things. I wasn't confused. I wasn't forgetting. I was reporting a crime. Within minutes, 2 officers arrived at Nina's house, a man and a woman. The female officer knelt in front of me like I was her own mother and said gently, "Take your time, start wherever you can." So I did. I told them everything: the pills, the memory gaps, the photos, the notebook, the men in the basement, the footage on the cameras. Every detail poured out of me like water through a cracked dam. The officers exchanged a look that told me they believed me, truly believed me. The female officer placed a hand on my arm and said, "Ma'am, you are not going back there. We're getting you protection." They called detectives, sent a patrol car to watch the street, arranged emergency paperwork for a protective order. Everything moved quickly, like they understood the urgency in a way I hadn't even been able to articulate. By evening, Detective Larson, a tall woman with sharp eyes and a steady voice, sat across from me at Nina's dining table. She watched the footage, every second of it. Her jaw tightened, her eyebrows drew together. When the screen showed Harold taking money from those men, she closed her eyes briefly, then said, "This is criminal. Multiple felonies. You did the right thing by leaving." Those words weakened my knees all over again. Before leaving, she looked me straight in the eyes and said, "He doesn't control the story anymore. You do." That night, I slept in Nina's guest room. The door locked, a chair pushed against the knob, the window shades drawn tight. I barely rested, but at least I wasn't under his roof. The next morning, Harold was arrested. Detective Larson called me herself. "He didn't take it well," she said, "but he's in custody." The relief I felt didn't come as a wave. It came in pieces. A breath here, a tear there. My hands stopped shaking for the first time in months. But the aftermath wasn't simple. There were statements to give, evidence to hand over, paperwork to sign, interviews with detectives, meetings with prosecutors. I had to face replays of footage I didn't want burned into my memory. I had to answer questions that made my stomach twist, and I had to hear details about what Harold had been doing with my images, what he was planning, that nearly sent me collapsing to the floor. But I made it through every single step, because surviving betrayal means walking through flames you never asked for. My children cried when they found out. My daughter held me so tightly I could feel her heartbeat against mine. "Mom," she whispered, "I'm so sorry we didn't see it." But it wasn't their fault. Harold fooled everyone. Men like him always do. Months passed. There were court hearings, lawyers, more statements, a trial, and finally, justice. Harold was convicted of multiple charges tied to exploitation, drugging, and unlawful surveillance. He won't see freedom for a very long time. As for me, I moved to a small apartment in a senior community. Bright hallways, friendly neighbors, doors that lock, security cameras I control. I started gardening again, knitting again, laughing again. Healing isn't quick. Betrayal from someone you loved doesn't fade like a bruise. It lingers. It reshapes you. But it also teaches you something no one ever wants to learn. Even the gentlest voice can hide the darkest intentions. But I'm still here, alive, awake, rebuilding, living on my own terms again. And if you're listening to my story right now, I want you to hear this clearly. You deserve safety. You deserve peace. You deserve to be believed. And you are stronger than anything that tried to break you. Thank you for staying with me through this journey. Now, before we end, please don't forget. If this story touched you, if it opened your eyes, or if you simply want more real stories from women like me, like, share, and subscribe to Mabel's Stories. And tell me in the comments, where are you watching from? And did this story resonate with you? Your voice matters. Your safety matters. And your story, whatever it is, deserves to be heard.